as my coach says, adaptation is never comfortable, right? That goes for anything in life. Growth is never comfortable. And if you feel comfortable, you're probably not growing.
Right.
So I think that tool of just learning how to push yourself, right? And going, okay, there's a limit, but I'm going to train like there is no fucking limit.
Hey everybody, welcome to It's Just Bodybuilding. Of course, I'm your host, Big Ron Partlow, my co-host, Dusty Hanshaw, and the producer, Scott McNally. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, and
ring the bell.
Ring the bell, yes. Remember, the show's sponsored by Mutant, so I am MUTANT.com, Dusty20, Big Ron20. Look who's here. We have LAYNE NORTON, PhD. We're very happy to have you here. I've known Layne for many years, probably about 10 years. I remember pouring you some Jaeger shots at Aaron Singerman's party once. And,
can we do the whole show just about that? That sounds like a fun conversation.
I have no memory of that. I wonder if those two things are connected.
Yeah. So we go back to kind of my early expo days, and I've happily watched Layne put more. I think you put even more letters behind your name eventually, and then just got more and more renowned for your sort of anti-nonsense approach. And that's why we're all fans of you, man. And that's why you're here, because we know that you genuinely want to make people better. And the good people in the industry that just want people to actually make progress. And that's what we all tried to do so hard for so many years before we all, eventually gave up. And and now we are here with you. And I just want to say that, it's great to have you on the show, because you've been on Rogan and you've been on Huberman and all these big podcasts. So, what's that been like for you? I'd love to hear what it was like to just go on Rogan's show.
No kidding.
Yeah, I mean, Rogan was actually, it's funny when I look back at my career, because I've been in this industry 20 years now. Because you were saying you were 10 years ago just getting started to going to expos and stuff. And my first thought was, damn, I've been doing it for 10 years at that point, when I was a kid. And so, it's funny because I think most people who follow me now have followed me in the last couple of years. It hasn't been, from the old bodybuilding days, or even when I was really good at competitive powerlifting. It's funny. So people will, you made it or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of felt like I made it in 2009 when I was at the Olympia covering it for bodybuilding.com, sitting in the front row getting paid to be there. I remember leaving and going, is my life real?
Yeah.
And so I think what's happened over the last couple of years is there has been kind of a transition, and my content has transitioned as well. I love bodybuilding. I always love bodybuilding. I love powerlifting too. But, those aren't, as much as I enjoy that space, those aren't the people who really need the most help right now. And so I think I just got interested in speaking about more general population topics, but super grateful for my time, being in hardcore bodybuilding and hardcore powerlifting, all those things I think really helped me a lot. And, being on Rogan, that was actually kind of before I got really well known, which I think has happened the last couple of years, where, I kind of noticed, 2009, 2010, that is when I go to expos, start getting recognized, we get stopped, that sort of thing. And then 2015-ish, we get stopped at gyms and anything fitness related. And now it's kind of I just noticed the difference because I'll just be in a movie, or I took my kids to the aquarium the other day, got stopped 4 different times. And, they're kind of oh, this is weird, it's cool. I'm not going to say that there's upsides and downsides, but the good thing is it's indicative of how far the message is getting out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, being on Rogan, that was before that I kind of had gotten to that point. And it was cool. It was very much, flew me in, stayed in a hotel, had a limo pick me up. took me to the podcast.
He was still in LA at this point, right? This was
I was still in LA at this point.
Yeah.
I actually think it was closer to like
it's like 2017 or
it was 18. September 2018. But
I remember it was a big deal to the bodybuilders. Bodybuilders were talking.
Yeah.
Lane's going to be on Rogan.
Yeah, it was. He had followed me. Rogan had followed me probably about, I want to say like 6 to 12 months before that on Twitter.
Okay.
Maybe it's probably a year before that. And I remember
was that funny when you saw that?
What's that?
Was that funny? Like when you saw that, like when you started seeing names like Joe Rogan following you and stuff?
Yeah, that's been weird. Like a few months ago, for example, I was on Instagram and my friend Peter Attia had I think Chris Hemsworth is one of his clients. And I just clicked on Chris's profile and it said follow back. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck? You know? Wait, Thor's following me? That's fucking cool. And actually, it's funny enough. He only likes my lifting videos. Most people, when I post my lifting videos, they're like, we don't care about this. Give us more information. Well, you know what? Thor fucking cares, so fuck you all.
That's funny. Okay, great.
Rogan was cool. He had actually, when we had done it, he had kind of double booked himself, I think by accident. And he actually had a comedy show that night, and I think it was in Toronto, actually. And so we rolled in. Me and Dom, so it was me and Dom DiGastino, who's a friend of mine, did the podcast together because he's a ketogenic diet expert. And we were like goofing around with his weight set when Joe walked in, and we were like, oh shit, you know. But he was cool, like very gracious, you know, took time with everybody. He was a great host. After we were done, like, you know, took pictures with everybody, wanted to take pictures, all that kind of stuff. And it was a good experience. Huberman was a little bit different, but Huberman, man, as far as podcasts that moved the needle for my career, I mean, that would have been the biggest one.
Really?
Like that one, I think he said it was actually his biggest podcast that he'd ever done, like in terms of reach. I think it was that or another one. It was like between the two of us. So that went really well. You know, I actually was in LA. I was doing multiple podcasts. I just filmed Andy Frisella's podcast. Mm-hmm. The next day flew to LA, did Dax Shepard's podcast, and then was finishing up Huberman's, which Dax and I like still keep. I actually trained with Dax when I was out there this last time a couple weeks ago. And Kristen came too, his wife. She's actually getting some guns on her. Like she's getting some biceps on her. I was proud of her. I'm like, and Dax is getting pretty jacked too. I'm like, you know, they're a funny couple because he's like 6'4" and she's like 5'1" or like it's funny when they're together. But very nice people. So, anyways, Huberman was the last podcast on that tour, and I was staying about 45 minutes away. So I was driving up the coast. It was a really nice drive actually, all the way up to I think he was in Malibu, and his office is I think it's moved now. But came in, his producer met me. You know, we did I think we actually did photos like before the podcast. Like they got some black, you know, he does everything all black. Mm-hmm. And then we're getting ready to sit down. I was like, hey man, you know, do you want to use the bathroom? I tend to talk a lot, so you might want to go because it might be a long podcast. And he's like, no, I've never had to stop a podcast. Well, 3 hours in, he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, see?
I told you.
It was the ability to talk. So, but no, it was good. And he's actually been, you know, I really like Andrew. We text, you know, every couple of weeks and catch up. And, you know, I appreciate what he's doing for science. A lot of people think that that I would go after him because he is kind of cutting edge with this stuff. But like I've talked to him. And what I appreciate about him is he will change his opinion on stuff if you give him evidence. And he actually recently started a portal where people can upload documents or references if they wanted to check out of like in opposition of things that are on the show. So I think that's pretty cool, you know, being willing to consider an outside opinion. There's not a lot of people that do that. So I tell people, I'm like, hey, you know, everybody, like I've made claims before that were wrong. I've, you know, gotten shit wrong. So like, I don't like that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is how you handle it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
You just get so many people who just double down or they do the whole, you know, there's a guy, I don't know. I've never seen him before. I think he's a bodybuilder, but he was like, you don't want to have whey protein. Here's my secret. If you have whey protein by itself, it can't attach to your muscles. I'm like, what the fuck are we even talking about here? Like, he's like, well, you got to have it with some carbohydrates. I'm like, well, I mean, carbs will secrete insulin. Insulin helps drive amino acids in the cells. That's fine. Maybe get a little bit more net protein balance, but like pretending that whey protein doesn't work because it doesn't attach. I'm like, do you know that like just because the whey particles are small, they're not like too small? Like, I don't know if this is a weird thing for you that like with a chicken breast, you're looking, seeing tissue. And I don't know if you're thinking like you eat that and the tissue just becomes tissue, but that's not really how that shit works. So, you know, people like, and then I commented like, tell me you haven't had digestive physiology without telling me you haven't had digestive physiology. Right. And he just said, well, look at me and look at you. I'm like, okay, here we go. You know, like, you know, and you guys know me. I'm not against PEDs. I competed drug-free, but I'm not against anybody who takes PEDs. That's just, it's just a different choice. But I'm like, okay, guys, so we're not going to pretend that this has anything to do with that. Okay. You know, it's just the typical shit. People do this stuff and double down, you know.
You must be having a field day, though, now, considering, because I think back to how things have changed in bodybuilding and fitness over the last decade. And it seems like the new move for everyone is to be an educator. So I started lifting, and now I'm putting out Instagram posts about what you need to do with your nutrition. I mean, it wasn't as much like that, 15 years ago. But literally now, every time I turn around, everybody's an educator. My wife, she's working on her PhD, and she's constantly telling me, this guy just got it wrong, or this girl got it wrong. There's just so much information out there, and a lot of it isn't necessarily the best. But it's hard for us to pick through, honestly.
Yeah, I think, things are so different now. In a lot of ways, it's better for bodybuilders, like in terms of opportunities, because you really can create a personal brand now. Back in the day, you were kind of beholden to whatever supplement company you were with, or if you were in with a magazine, or those sorts of things. Because I tell people, I'm like, if you look at the guys who've had the most financial success, I mean, obviously guys who have won the Olympia multiple times, they tend to be more financially successful because of the reach they develop. But I mean, like Phil Heath, Jay Cutler, these were good business people. You know what I mean? They made smart business decisions.
Yeah.
There were plenty of guys who won big shows who didn't do that great. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now I think it's easier to develop a personal brand because you're so connected with your audience, whereas before you were going through an intermediary, be it, you're appearing in ads for a supplement company, or you're in a magazine, like getting a spread, those sorts of things. So now the problem with that is people realize that like it's content that wins, right? Like if you're a bodybuilder and you're just having photos of your physique and training, that's good. You'll develop a following, but it's not the most monetizable following. If they think that if they like your content, they like the way you speak, they like your ideas, that is a much more monetizable following.
Right.
It's one of the conversations I've had with friends of mine who were females, kind of different but still the same. I'm like, hey, you got to realize, like, you can develop a really big following putting out a certain kind of content. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to make money from it unless you want to be doing like stuff that you might not like doing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Right.
No disrespect, like if you want to do that, that's your whole business. But I do think it's easy to get roped into the pressure to produce content, and not just content, but content that's really sexy. And really sexy is very extravagant claims. If you're walking into social media now, it is a saturated landscape with a lot of people saying stuff. And so what is one way to stand out? Say really crazy shit. That's one way to stand out, right? Like if you don't want to put the work in. So I think one thing people don't realize is, my message has been very consistent for a long time, but it's been a long time. I've been doing this for 20 years in some way or another, whether it's writing articles for bodybuilding.com, muscular development, putting out video content, putting out content on my social media. Like I was doing content before content was called content.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think what you're seeing is this explosion of people feeling like, okay, if I want to make it monetizable, I have to have content that's engaging to pull people in and believe that I'm an authority. But unfortunately, a lot of what gets eyeballs very quickly is just, quite frankly, nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be the pushback on that? Do you think we're seeing the pushback already, with people like you doing so well and kind of exploding? I can't see it going on infinitely and just getting worse and worse. It can't do that, can it?
Well, I don't. So here's the thing: people ask me all the time, "Are things worse now than ever?" And I'll tell people, I don't think they're worse than ever. I think it depends on what kind of silo you get into, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of people, whatever tribe they get into, and people are super tribal, they just end up following all those folks, and then they're never exposed to a different opinion, and then that's why they lose their minds when they see a different opinion for the first time. But back when I was getting into bodybuilding in circa 2000, 2001, you didn't really have evidence-based, like it was, if you were lucky, there was a couple guys in the magazines who actually knew what they were talking about, but mostly it was, bro science, some of which we've learned now is good, and some of which we've learned now was even though it got results, was maybe not the most efficacious thing, or was, unnecessary extra stuff, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so now, if you know how to look, you can find a lot of really good evidence-based people. There's a lot of really good people out there, but you've just got to wade through more people who are also putting out, really shitty stuff. And I think that's the hard part, right? Is learning. I tell people all the time, when it comes to trying to find experts, more than degrees, more than certifications, more than, coaching credentials, more than, athletic achievements, listen to how people talk, okay? Real experts very rarely will say things like best, worst, always, never. Like, they don't use superlatives like that. It'd be like going to a financial advisor and be like, hey, what's the best investment? And it's like, they're probably going to ask you 50 questions after that, right? Like, what's your risk tolerance? What's your time frame? What do you have saved? There's going to be all these questions that come after it. So I think, when you're looking for experts, it's kind of like counterintuitive. You actually need to look for people who sound somewhat unsure of themselves, because they'll say things like, yeah, we think that this matters in these circumstances. But then the other thing an expert will do is, like, a lot of times they'll give you a devil's advocate argument in a situation, right? They'll say, well, the counter to that would be this, and I think just like people who are just like, they're a hammer and everything's a nail. I mean, like that isn't how experts talk typically. Right. So when it comes to, navigating the landscape, it is really hard for people, and it has gotten to be a lot, because again, if you want to stand out, the way to stand out is just say really extreme stuff. And it's funny, people will send me all the time now, to your point, Ron, there's all these people who are doing debunking stuff now.
Yes.
And almost like same style, right? Like they've got the thing pulled up in the background and it's their face on it, and they're debunking the stuff in the background. And people are like, oh, does this bother you? I'm like, bother me? I fucking love it. Like, good for them. We need, like, I'm just glad I'm not the only one anymore. Like, I got fucking help now. This is before, I was like, I can remember so many times being in like muscular development forums or bodybuilding.com forums, and somebody making a claim and me going like, nobody else is going to call this? Nobody? And they'll be like, but Layne, he coaches people at the Olympia, or Layne, he competes. And I'm like, okay, but I know that this is certifiably false. Like, not an opinion, this is objectively false, right?
Right.
So I think, like, I just got used to, like, I don't care who it is, and I don't care how big their following is, and I don't care what their credentials are. If you say something that's not evidence-based, I'll call you on it. But I always am happy if, for example, I had something one time, a guy I called out multiple times. His name was Thomas DeLauer. He was a low-carb advocate. And he actually, over time, softened his stance on a lot of stuff to where now, I mean, when we talk, we don't really disagree on much. But he changed his opinion over time. and asked if I would be on his podcast. And I'm like, hell yeah, I'll be on your podcast, man. Because like I think that takes a lot of integrity to be able to like say, I had this opinion and I changed it.
Well, right. People forget it's not personal. Like that's the weirdest thing is this isn't an attack on Dusty Hanshaw. It's the stance that you took that you're like, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm just showing you evidence that what you're saying is incorrect. And if you've got any sort of backbone, that should be good news. I mean, if I could go back and talk to the beginning me that was coaching and starving people to death and all the things I didn't have to do when I thought I knew everything, and I'm sure in 10 years I'll say that about the me that's doing it now, hopefully. I hope I'm not done evolving.
Dusty, that is what you just said, I say it a different way, but it's the same thing, which is being wrong is actually beautiful. Because if you're doing everything right, you've maxed it out. There's nothing else you can't improve. You know what I mean? So it's like, listen, I like to be right. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't. Of course I fucking like to be right. I'll do cartwheels in my fucking living room if I'm right. But if I'm wrong, and I know I'm wrong, and I see the evidence, I'm like, okay, well, that's like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, dude, I still compete. Like in powerlifting, but I compete. Like, you don't think I want to be the biggest, strongest, most muscular human I possibly can? Of course I do. Like, my ego's pretty big, but not bigger than my desire to get jacked, okay? So just remember that when you're thinking that I'm like being, I'm being obtrusive. But I think, Dusty, the thing is when it becomes personal is when people make a certain way of doing things an identity, right?
Right.
And so that's what, like, you notice, like, one of the things I popularized was flexible diet, right? Like, I talked about that a lot. If you go to my Instagram, you don't see flexible dieting guru or flexible dieting master or flexible dieting anywhere, right? Because I don't want to tie my horse to that cart, Like my PhD advisor had a great saying. He said, "Date your hypothesis, don't marry it, because the divorce is a bitch."
That's fantastic. Wow. There's the entire show right there. We can just sum it up in a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I tried a little bit different version of that, but it got me in trouble on Twitter, but I like 5 years ago, if I'd said this, it'd been fine. But I said, you can date your hypothesis, but don't make the hoe a housewife, I'm like, Dre said it first. Dr. Dre said kind of, like, get out of him.
See, most of our viewers actually didn't understand it the first time you said it, but they got it there.
Pure clarification right there.
So you know who's watching.
Exactly.
I really want to ask you this question. This was like, I'm actually jumping down my list because it fits perfectly. But what is the biggest thing that you ever changed your mind on? And was it painful and hard? Or can you also remember something that was painful and hard to change your mind on?
I mean, I know what I think it's probably branched chain amino acids, supplemental branched chain amino acids. And my reasoning for that is, I was with Civation for a long time. They had a BCA product that I used and I liked, and I would recommend to people. And then there was my first line of supplements that I have with bodybuilding.com, had a product with BCAAs in it. And then got to, 2019, and I was getting ready to start my current supplement company, Outwork Nutrition. And I was putting together the recovery product, and I was like, man, I just can't back this up with I can't back this up anymore. Like, it would have to be like, hey guys, we're evidence-based except for this thing, which is my feelings.
Wow.
Now, again, like I still think branched chains have some utility in certain situations, but I think the research is pretty clear that if you're consuming enough total protein, especially high quality protein sources, I just don't think it really does a whole lot on top of that. But I can come up with some scenarios where it might make a difference. But when I'm looking at the stuff I want to put in, I'm like, okay, this has a lot better evidence. This has a lot better evidence. I'm going to stick with this stuff. So that was probably the most, I wouldn't say painful, But it was like, it took me a long time because, I mean, that's like, my research was on BCAAs, not supplemental BCAAs, but just BCAAs in general. And then, you know, I was recommending it for over a decade, you know? So it was like, you know, there's still people who would be like, remember when you recommended branched chain amino acids? I'm like, yeah, I fucking remember. Like, I did the best I could with what I had at the time, and I thought it was a good recommendation, and I changed my mind later. So, you know, I tell people, if you're not willing to change your mind based on new evidence, you're basically a politician, you know?
Right.
Like, and that's what you find is people get so tribal about all this stuff. To Dusty's point, like, it just becomes an identity like anything. And I don't know what to do about it. I really think it's actually just a human problem that it's a couple things. One, we like to feel like we belong to something. We like to feel like we're in a tribe. That's part of it. Two, I think this is actually somewhat of an insecurity thing too. Like, Ron, you can tell me I don't do flexible dieting. I'm not going to go, well, here's why you should do it. I'm going to go, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like, do you, right? Like, I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want, right? Like, I don't care if somebody only eats rat anuses. Like, I don't care, right? Like, just don't make a claim that that's the best way to, like, you know, build muscle and be shredded, right? Like, that's all I care about. Or claim that it's going to cure heart disease or whatever it is. The problem, you know, so I don't care about what an individual does. The problem is when you take what you do and you start trying to, again, like almost like a religion, trying to get everybody else to do it. And it's because you're actually insecure about it.
Right.
That's the thing. Because if you really feel like it's the best thing to do and you feel that way for yourself, why do you care? Like, why do you care if anybody else does it? But I see so many people, it's like, let's get them in our group. Let's get them in our tribe, you know?
Right. Well, you know, what's funny though, is it's in reverse as well. Cause you know, I'll post videos of my training and then people will get on there and go, that's not great for everyone. And I'm like, I didn't say it was.
Right.
I've never claimed you should do this. This is literally a video
you usually
doing what I
train
do.
like you.
Yeah. But it's funny because I think people do they create that tribe as well. Like, you know, I did DC training. That's what put the size on me to put me on the map. And then they come to me and they're like, so I'm going to do DC training, right? I'm like, no, absolutely not. Well, why not? You're not advanced enough, or you need that. Like, or the big answer would be, I don't know. We have to watch your body and see what things work best for you. You know, it worked for me because I trained at such a high intensity level that more volume would kill me. It wasn't a magical program for everybody, you know?
Well, I think, you know, people don't realize with volume too, like, you know, DC was a lot of rest pause. So it wasn't actually super low volume, right? You weren't doing a lot of, you know, whole sets, but within a set, there was a lot of micro sets, you know? And so, you know, I think the other thing too is, to your point, Dusty, like I remember one time I posted a physique photo and I had like cupping marks on me, right? Because my massage therapist did cupping. And I got people, that's not evidence-based. There's no evidence that cupping works. I go, I know. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. I like the way it feels. I don't care if it doesn't work.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not saying you should do it. You probably shouldn't. But I feel better afterwards, and so I don't really care if you do it. You know, by all means, don't do it. You know, and I think people were just really like taken aback by that response. But there's so much stuff like that where, like, you know what the most number one underrated thing for training and making progress with training is? Just fucking enjoying your training. Just being fucking fired up to go in and train.
Absolutely.
And I made my best progress training like a power lifter, not because I think powerlifting training is the best way of doing things, but because I fucking loved it and I was jacked up to go hard every single set, right?
Right.
Like, that's... You find me, you might be able to find exceptions, but I think if you look at high-level bodybuilders, the two commonalities are they have good genetics, obviously, and most of them train really fucking hard. Now, I can find exceptions to that, but most, like I train in the same gym as Derek Lunsford, and that dude trains fucking hard, like, and he likes to train. I see him in there. I train 2-3 hours a day, and he's in there every bit as long as I am, you know?
Right.
And so, you know, it's hard to do that consistently over years and decades if you don't like what you're doing, right?
Right. Yep.
So I think for people, you know, they'll show me all these different types of training, and I'll be like, okay, but are you going to like be consistent with that? Or are you going to like enjoy that? And they're like so like taken aback by the question.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm like, well, yeah, like, okay, really, riddle me this. Do you really think if you don't have the perfect training program, but you train really hard for 20 fucking years, that you're not going to look good? Like, come on, guys. This is not difficult math here, all right? So my example I do for that with people is I'll just pick somebody out in the audience. And I'll go, hey, you. If I'm giving a seminar. Like, hey, if I tell you I want you to become the best three-point shooter you possibly can be, and you can't get any coaching, no training, you can't even watch videos online, right? But all you did every day for 10 years was go out and shoot three-pointers for 2 hours a day. You probably won't go to the NBA, but I bet you'd be pretty fucking good at shooting three-pointers. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
And we know that inherently that consistency is so important. But so many people just try to hack their way around. Like you saying, Dusty, it's like they want to jump straight to the advanced program. Yeah. And it's like, no, show me you can do this basic shit first. Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not even like something magic happens to your muscles where all of a sudden they start, you know, adapting differently. No, it's just if you come in and it's your first workout and I hammer you and you can't fucking walk for 2 weeks, like you're not going to be consistent with it. You know what I mean? So it's like you gotta work up to it. It takes time.
You would love when I first hired Chris Aceto in 2009. I got all my stuff, and he doesn't write training, you know. So I texted him. I said, "Hey, Chris, how do you want me to train?" You know, and I'm expecting him to give me like high volume, low, you know, whatever. I get back 2 words: fucking hard. And I was like, understood. And that was our full conversation about training for a decade.
Yeah. But I think so many people don't understand like hard training, because I'll post my training, and most of my training I do, especially because powerlifting now, because I'm trying to manage fatigue, I don't go to absolute failure. Like I usually stop a rep or 2 or 3 shy, right? And I'll get people like, well, your training is easy. I'm like, okay, so you've never trained to absolute failure, okay, on a compound exercise. And here's why. Like a compound leg exercise, all right? Because I've done, I think like my best set of squats ever for reps was like 535 for a set of 10. Like it was just fucking dumb.
That's wild.
When I got done with that set, it was kind of at an in-between level on the rack where I could unrack it, but by the time I was done, I couldn't fully stand up because I was so fatigued. I got in one side, and I could not get the other side in, and somebody had to run over from the other side of the gym to get it on there. But once they did, I fell down, laid on the floor, and couldn't fucking breathe for about 2 or 3 minutes. Like, I'm just going, because you guys know, if you've done a hard set of squats, a high rep set of like free bar squats, that shit will take it out of you, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, okay, absolute failure is me laying on the ground for 15 minutes. You're telling me if I stopped 2 reps shy of that set was easy.
Right.
Yeah,
every single rep, and that's what I tell people, like, every single rep of that set was hard. You do a 10 rep actual max, every rep is hard. Okay? And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, because I'll see some of these people, like if you take in research studies, people will underestimate their reps to failure by about 5 on average. Okay? So what you'll have is people, they'll get to like rep 8 and they'll say, how many do you have left? They'll say 2. And then when they really push them, they end up doing 15, right?
Right.
And so I tell people, if you've never, even though the latest research suggests that to maximize hypertrophy, you probably don't have to go to complete failure, but you got to get pretty close, okay? So 1 or 2 reps shy. But if you've never trained to complete and utter failure, you have no concept of what that feels like, and you probably just stop when it gets really hard. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
And Yeah, I think the good thing about the way I grew up, the era I trained in, even though I don't, people would say Dorian Yates and I would not agree on training methodologies. I remember reading an article about him, and I don't know if this is true or not. It probably is. Where it said other bodybuilders would find out when he was going in the gym so that they didn't go at the same time because they didn't want him to embarrass them with how freaking nuts he was and intense he was. And I was like, I want to be that way, you know? So if somebody would ask to train with me, I take it as a personal insult. I still train alone to this day. I take it as a personal insult. I'm like, well, you're going to vomit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think I was, on leg days, I think I was like 4 for 5 on people who vomited, you know?
Right.
So it's just you learn, if you can really learn how to push yourself like that, you get to the point where you actually, in the sick way, you enjoy it, you know, and it becomes such a tool that you can leverage because most people don't know how to do that.
Oh, for sure.
I am a big proponent of, you know, the back in the less scientific 90s, you know, when I sort of, you know, came up, a lot of stuff was done just because it was really hard. And it was like you were trying to, it was like we were inadvertently working our mental toughness into our training. Like we weren't just there to stress tissue. We were there to like push yourself. Like how far can you go? And when we thought of the wall, like you got to hit the wall. That was how he used to talk. It was like, where's the wall? Like you have to hit the wall at full speed to find out where it is, you know? And so I feel like people micromanage all this minutia regarding the perfect training program sometimes. And that's, you know, you're talking about enjoying your training, but that was part of the sick enjoyment.
I mean, I think Mike Israetel had a great post about a year ago, and I loved it. And he said, stop trying to out-science hard fucking training. Now, me and Mike are both science guys. Both got PhDs. But we see what people are doing. Like, well, this tempo, and what about this periodization scheme? And it's like, dude, I see you train. Shut the fuck up with this stuff. Like, learn how to go hard, okay?
Yep.
It is the single most important thing. And like you said, like you think, I always equate lifting to like, there's like progressive overload for life. Like the more hard shit you do and go through, the more hard shit you feel confident you can go through, right?
Right.
And so if I think about like the first few times I trained or like the first few years I trained, I remember when I moved to doing legs twice a week, I'm like, there's no fucking way this is going to work, you know, because I'm like, I'm sore so much. You know, what I found is, wow, my body adapted. You know, my body adapted over time. And wow, I got great results. And then, but to the point where when I was training for IPF Worlds in 2015, when I broke the squat record at that time, I ended up squatting 668 pounds and I weighed 201.5 pounds the day of the meet. And I was squatting 4 times a week. I was benching 4 times a week. I was deadlifting twice a week. And I'm not talking about like a low number of sets. I'm talking about like, I think the lightest weight I touched in prep for IPF Worlds was like 510 pounds for sets of 7. And I think I was maxing, like conservative maxing twice a week. Like if I told you what I did 2 weeks out from IPF Worlds, it was just stupid. I think it was something like 40,000 total pounds of volume or something like that. I mean, like if you showed me that even a few years before, I'd said no fucking way I can recover from that. There's no way I could do that. Mm-hmm. And what you find is like, you know, if you can push through that discomfort initially where it is so hard and you do feel like shit, you know, as my coach says, adaptation is never comfortable, right? That goes for anything in life. Growth is never comfortable. Mm-hmm. And if you feel comfortable, you're probably not growing. Right. So I think that tool of just learning how to push yourself, right? And going, okay, there's a limit, but I'm going to train like there is no fucking limit, you know, and my body will tell me when I've hit it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the problem with not the factual side of the science now, but like you said, if I'm 3 to 4 reps below my true failure, and then I'm being told to leave 3 reps in reserve, well, now I'm not even training. And I feel like that's the part that people think it's an egomaniac attack, the old school mindset of just go harder. But it's because chances are each of us has hit true failure a handful of times. Even if you're animals, it's like there is a huge difference. I mean, we've all had those sets. It's funny, but I'm sure you've had these, Lane, where you're going and then say you rack the weight and all of a sudden you realize that sound came back on and you can hear the gym again. And you're like,
yeah.
You have that. And I'm always like, well, why can't I get that every time? Because that's the set I like. You feel like somebody just grabbed the knob and turned it back up and you're like, where was I?
Oh,
for that to take place.
Out of body experience. I've had that. I mean, so many, I would say, sets of squats where I can think about that, where, like I felt like I couldn't, I've had sets of squats where I've thought nothing could get me to stop. The only reason I'm stopping is because I literally can't fucking breathe anymore. It's such a huge tool. And, I think with bodybuilding especially, it seems to be actually my coach, his name's Zach Robinson. He actually did this meta regression. He's a PhD student, showing this, that basically with bodybuilding, with muscular hypertrophy, the closer you get to failure, typically the better the results are. The only downside to hitting failure is it is, going through those sets is fatiguing. So it may limit your recovery and your ability to perform in subsequent sets. So there may be value in not always training to absolute failure just from a cumulative effect perspective, right? But I will tell people, I'm like, every once in a while you need to do something where you go, let's see what kind of balls I got. Let's see what I'm made of. You know what I mean?
Right.
My apologies to the ladies out there who do train hard. There's plenty of you, so my apologies for the testicle reference. But I think you know what I'm saying.
Hey, some of those ladies have more than the rest of us in the gym.
Their balls are here. Their balls are definitely here. I've seen some of these girls diet. Their balls are here.
Not me. He said it, not me. That's good.
Yeah.
No, I think, but with powerlifting, it's interesting because if you think about what you're trying to do with powerlifting, you're really trying to produce as much force as possible, right? So when he did the same meta regression, but looking at strength instead of hypertrophy, he found that proximity to failure had almost no bearing on strength results. It was more about trying to move a given load as fast as possible, because you can apply the same force to 300 pounds that you do to 500 pounds. It's just 300 pounds going to move faster, right?
Right.
So, kind of going back to like old school bro science, maybe there was something to the whole West Side Barbell doing speed days, for back offs. They would do, heavy max out days. And then they would have a day that was a lot more volume, but much lower weight, where they were trying to move weight for speed. Maybe that was a situation where form was in front of science, and so, I think there's a lot of different tools, and a lot of how I train now is, mostly for powerlifting. So I've actually kind of got to convince myself to not go into that methodology so much. At least with the main lifts. I do train a lot closer to failure on my accessory stuff. So if I'm doing a machine press or a hack squat or something like that, I will train closer to failure on those. But really, we stay, around 2 or 3 reps shy of failure for most of the year until I get close to a meet, and then we go up and get more intense. But with bodybuilding, you got to learn how to push yourself. And I'll never forget, I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Dave Gooden, but Dave was, for a long time, was the biggest money winner in natural bodybuilding history. He was WNBF world champ multiple times. Then he actually won his IFBB pro card as a Masters competitor. I think he won it at the Team Universe, I want to say. Or maybe it was Masters. I can't remember. And Dave was the guest poser at my first show in 2001. And I had these little skinny chicken legs. People would make fun of me on bodybuilding.com, ask me if I even trained. It was upsetting because I actually trained really fucking hard. They were just slow. And I remember asking Dave, I said, what am I going to do to, what can I do to catch these up?
Yeah.
And he was like, if you have legs that are weak point and they don't respond well to training, and you're going to stay drug free, you better teach yourself how to tolerate some pain. And I remember just really taking that to heart and just fucking punishing myself. Like my sessions for legs were horrifying if I look back, but I loved it. I loved that sick feeling of like not even hardly being able to walk afterwards. Like I love that, and if I ever go back and, I say I'm like semi-retired because I don't want to say fully retired because maybe one day I will do another show.
Yeah.
I look forward to training that way again. It'd be fun.
Get the glutes in one more time, Layne.
Yeah. I don't know. I tell people, it's just tough, with powerlifting. It's, I still have to do some of the things like, sleep and stress management and all those things to make sure I don't get injured or have too much pain. But for the most part, my gym sessions are long. I mean, my powerlifting sessions would be 2-3 hours at a time. But when I leave the gym, I kind of leave the gym. You know what I mean? I still got to make sure I'm getting in enough nutrition, all that kind of thing. But with bodybuilding, I mean, that kind of stays with you, especially during contest prep. And for me, I think, having 2 young kids now, it's like, and I'm divorced. So on weeks I have the kids, it's me. And I have them half the time. So I just wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm like, oh, sorry guys, dad doesn't want to go play because he's tired, like that sort of thing. So, maybe when they're older or something like that. But I think right now, powerlifting allows me to get my iron fix in. And I will say, after having done both, the one thing I love about powerlifting is when it comes down to it, when it's the last deadlift, win or lose, I control my own fate. You know what I mean? Right. And, obviously if you're really good in bodybuilding, I tell people, listen, if you're consistently really good, you're going to get rewarded. Okay. Like it does happen. Yeah. But it is a subjective sport. And that is probably the hardest part of it is you put so much work in, and at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to somebody's opinion.
Yep.
And there's no
I like the scoreboard. Yeah. The scoreboard is just pretty awesome to me in powerlifting because it's, other than the occasional false red lighting, everything's pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean that is the one subjective portion of it, and people complain about it. But I would say for the most part, the calls are pretty good, especially in the good big organizations like the IPF. But it's actually powerlifting. I'll tell people, I think it's a pretty fun sport to watch, actually, especially in person.
Oh yeah.
If you've got, especially if you've got a good announcer who can tell you what's going on. Because there can be a lot of gamesmanship with changing deadlift attempts and lot numbers and all kinds of stuff. So it's fun. I love that aspect of it. But then with bodybuilding, I obviously love the performance aspect of it. The creative aspect of it. That was fun, and I loved. It's just really cool to watch your body change. Like it's cool to get fucking strong, but it's also cool to watch your body change. I think that's Dusty, I'd love to get your take on this, and Ron. I think it would be really hard to be a competitive bodybuilder these days and make progress because there's so much pressure to look stage ready now because you're on social media all the time.
We talk about it all the time.
Like I took, when I won my pro card in natural bodybuilding, I took 4 years off from competing because I'm like, to add 3 pounds of stage weight, right? Because I know it's going to take me fucking forever because it's natural bodybuilding. Right?
Natural bodybuilding.
And I'm like, man, but and I got up to, my competition weight was like, 192, something like that. And I got up to like 230 in the off season. And I wasn't like fat, but you know what off season looks like, if you post pictures online, people are going to be like, oh, what happened to you,
Yeah.
And that'd be so hard to deal with these days. That would be so hard to manage because you just have trolls talking shit all the time.
I was in northern Canada with a hoodie on for 8 months.
Yeah. No one knew.
No one saw me.
Exactly.
We were eating.
What makes it hard is that we've further lied essentially to the public, so they don't know what happens. When I was on my way up, I'll say, but not really on the map yet. I had done a show. I was about a year into an off season, so I'm heavy. And a guy came over that was a friend of my wife's at the time. And he was from her church, and he came over and he goes, "Oh, I thought you were a bodybuilder," because I wasn't shredded. So all he saw was a big fat guy. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I've had that and a grandmother once tell me I was skinny. Those two things were my two closest to suicide. But no, I mean, it was funny because I realized like people don't know. And that's the part where the work gets done, you know? And that was going to be my question to you, Layne, was when you've done both, because for me, I could, like Ron knows this because he actually was in my room when you were taking a look at me before I hit the stage. And I told him, I was like, I just wish I could be done now, because the fun part of the prep to me is the prep. And then I wake up in the morning, I see myself at peak, and I don't care after that. I'm like, I'm the best I've ever been. Cool, I'm done. So for you, taking away the winning the competition in powerlifting or winning the competition in bodybuilding, which of the preps did you find to be more rewarding?
You know, they're rewarding for different reasons. I do think I enjoy powerlifting more just because of the objectivity of it, you know, and the numbers you're hitting in training. And I think the cool thing is, you know, on a day-to-day basis, I'm doing what I'm going to compete with, right? Like I'm doing that action. Bodybuilding is one of the only sports where what you're presenting or what you're doing on competition day is completely different than what you do for, you know, most of your day-to-day, right? And so it's kind of a unique sport in that aspect. I do think bodybuilding is more – see, there's some ways that bodybuilding is more mentally challenging, and there's some ways that powerlifting is more mentally challenging. It's just different. But I think the hardest thing about bodybuilding, and the thing that I don't like, is I love to train, and by the end of bodybuilding prep, training becomes a chore, you know? Right. Because you're just you're so low energy, you know, and it really does like so I have a natural testosterone level of whatever I've ever had it measured in the off season is anywhere from 750 to 1,000. So I have pretty high natural testosterone. I got measured at the end of a prep and I was in the 200s. Like it fucks you up so bad. And I mean, like the mind games, the lack of sex drive. It's so funny. This old message board I was on one time, somebody made a thread that was, "What do you miss most during prep?" And everybody's listing off foods, right? And there's like 3 pages of this thread. And this one guy comes in and just goes, "Sex with my wife." And everybody's like, "Oh yeah!" Like we didn't think of that. And then everybody's like, "Yep, that's it," you know? So yeah, it's just such a, it just makes your whole life gets hard. Like even thinking gets hard. Like I think that's the thing I'm scared of most is like I have to use my brain so much now running businesses and being on podcasts and stuff. Like I'll look at my old DVD of my last competition where I'm like, there's a scene. I remember this where I'm setting up my clothes for travel, and it's like, you know, a CD when it used to skip. Yeah, that's what my brain looks like because I'm like, and then we'll like I couldn't fucking do it, you know?
Right. The scene remixed.
So I think I enjoy the powerlifting part of it more. Both offer unique challenges. I think the thing that makes bodybuilding rewarding is it is something that does not leave you for 24 hours a day, right? You're hungry, you're tired. Sometimes you stand up and you get lightheaded because you have such low blood pressure, you know, with like, you know, losing so much body fat. I think that challenge, when you get through it, it just makes it very rewarding to go through something so tough. Right.
Agreed.
I had a list of questions here that I wanted to kind of rapid fire hit you. Get like a 10-second general sort of. You know.
Good luck, Ron. All right, I'll do my best.
My plan was to ask you all these questions, and that quickly dissolved.
We've derailed that.
Fit them in. Yeah. No. It's just I have so many friends that are gonna be like, "You didn't ask him my question. You didn't ask Layne my question." Okay. Metabolic adaptation. How evil is it? Is it gonna get you? How much should you actually be worrying about it? who needs to be concerned, who doesn't?
I think it's something to be aware of. I don't think it's the great evil that everyone thought it was, or I think it's more of a big deal for people who are overweight, who are trying to lose a lot of weight and want to not regain it. For competitors, it's just something to be aware of, something that's going to happen. We all know that your energy expenditure is going to go down. You're going to have to kind of progressively drop calories as you go through a contest prep for the most part. It's not as, on average, it's about 15% reduction in BMR. And there's not a whole lot of strategies that seem to work to mitigate it, to be honest. So it's just something to be aware of, and, just got to deal with it.
Okay. What's the key to peaking someone with no diuretics?
I think the key is the same thing as if you're peaking them with diuretics. Be really fucking lean.
Really lean.
Here's the crazy thing about being lean and dry. If you have very low body fat, you look dry. Like that's it. That's the list, Yep. So I think, a lot of people will argue with me about this. I'm like, listen, can people take diuretics and look really good? Yes, I've definitely seen that. But I've just had so many examples of people who didn't take diuretics and still looked very, very, very dry. Mm-hmm. I think in general, peak week is, one, you have to look good going into peak week, period. Like, if you're not looking good going into peak week, there's nothing you're going to do in that last week that's going to drastically change everything.
Right.
And don't make a bunch of fucking changes. Don't change everything. It's just, you're picking over dollars, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the biggest thing. Just a few subtle tweaks here and there, fill out a little bit more glycogen, that sort of thing. Don't go crazy.
All right. Our listeners heard it here. We tell them the same thing, the exact same thing. Now they've heard it from you as well.
And he's smart.
Here's two lines to say. You know what I very rarely hear? God, I look like shit going in, but after that peak week, man, that fixed everything, and I look amazing. And how many times do we hear the following? God, I look so great a week out. What the fuck happened? Yeah, okay.
Right.
Well, then,
there we go.
I tell my clients, the ones I work with at a real high level, so what's your plan for me for peak week? And I go, my plan is to not screw you up. That's my plan.
Yeah. Big goal.
Not sexy, but I'm sorry. Chad Nichols kind of said the same thing about Ronnie Coleman. He's like, have you seen him? Yeah. I'm just going to try to not fuck up.
Basically, as a coach, you're like a fourth line player on the last week. You don't need to score the winning goal. Just don't get scored on. That's all you got to worry about.
I do, sorry to belabor this, but I do think a lot of it is people want busy work to feel like they're getting something special, and coaches want to give busy work so that they feel useful.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Do you ever adjust sodium with a competitor?
Yes, I actually will increase sodium on show day slightly. So I'll usually have people have a higher sodium meal about 2 hours out, usually about 50% of their normal daily sodium intake. And I tell people, if you want vascularity, sodium is your best friend. I mean, so many people, I don't know how they don't make this connection. They're like, man, I went and had a cheat meal and I got real fucking vascular. And why wasn't I like that in show day? And they're like, maybe I didn't have enough carbs. I'm like, you ate 1,000 grams of carbs over the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
What happened is you stopped giving a shit about sodium in water. You sat down and drank water, ate sodium, and then you got really vascular and filled out. And your answer is carbs?
Right.
So yeah, I will have some sodium, but I don't do a big sodium load. I don't do a big sodium deplete. I just kind of keep it steady throughout peak week. And then day of, add a little bit more in, and that usually works pretty well.
Yep.
Here's one for, especially for me and Dusty. We're getting up there. We're almost relics. What are the best things? I mean, I know you see it. You're seeing it all. What are the things that are really piquing your attention when it comes to anti-aging?
Resistance training.
There's nothing else.
5-minute ice bath followed by infrared sauna. And no, I mean, honestly, the shit that works is the shit we know works. I mean, you know, like I'm going to be 42 here in a month, and most people would say I look, you know, most people will comment that I look, you know, mid-30s, something like that. Part of it is probably genetics. I'm not going to pretend like, you know, that doesn't play. It does. But, I mean, you know, my 20s weren't your normal person's 20s. I exercised consistently. I got a lot of sleep. I didn't party a lot. I didn't beat my body up with drugs and alcohol, you know, other than those Jaeger shots.
You did out him on that one.
A decade ago. You're reformed now. You're reformed.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just like doing the stuff that you know works. You know, don't smoke. You know, don't do a bunch of hard drugs and shit. Like, take care of your body, and if you do that, your body takes care of you when you get older. There may be a few things, you know, but you know, I'm not all in on like fasting 23 hours a day and ice baths and all that sort of stuff. I think
Right.
that I think that the big stuff is still the big stuff that works. You know.
I must
What-
also
what do
add
you-
for the younger
Yeah.
viewers, Layne looks like he's in his 30s and his 40s, and I don't. And Layne stayed natural. Keep that in mind as well.
But that is, you know, I think, you know, I tell people I'm not against PEDs. I love watching the Olympia. Like I love watching, you know, untested bodybuilding. I think it's awesome, you know. But when you're taking something that is giving you such a strong outcome as a pharmaceutical, I mean, like people ask me about TRT. I'm like, hey, TRT is probably fine. Like the research shows it's pretty safe. You know, if you're replacing something that's missing, that's fine. But that's not what bodybuilders are doing. Like, let's be real here. You know, like we're going above and beyond, and that's cool. It's cool to look at, but you know, understand informed consent. Just like playing in the NFL, there's going to be a cost. You know. And
I think that's what gets missed, though, is those are the effects of what you're doing, and people don't get that. You know,
right.
I mean, I had people say that, like, would you rather be huge or still have all your hair? And I'm like, well, I already made that decision based on my hair and my size.
Can't edit. We can't edit the sentences that have periods at the end of them, as my friend John Maloney likes to say. You know,
Right. What's your thoughts? I know we're hitting an hour here, Layne. My last one on my list is what are your thoughts on all this stuff that all these coaches are hopping on about your gut health and your gut fauna and resetting your gut, and we got to do this for your gut, and you have to drink kombucha every day if you're going to be my client, and all my clients are on this probiotic stack and these fermented foods and maximizing it's just run with this. I want to hear you're smiling already.
So I heard a really good thing the other day, which is it's kind of like the I know all gurus, IKAs. Dr. Mike was talking about this. And they usually move into an area where the science isn't super clear yet, because then it's very easy to make big, bold claims, right? Like this was like gut health right now is like inflammation 10 years ago. Like just want a broad sweeping thing that you can just throw out there, inflammation. You know, and I'm
You're hitting a soft spot, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm like, so when people are like, well, I was really inflamed and I did this. I'm like, really? So you had your CRP and your IL-6 and your IL-1 measured? What were the levels? And they're like, just give me this blank stare, you know? And I'm like, so you don't even know what it actually is. You're just using this as a buzzword, right? One of the people I did my PhD with, she was doing her master's at the same time as me, same lab. Her name's Suzanne Defcoda. She's been to like the Nobel Prize meetings. She is one of the world's renowned gut microbiome experts. Here's the kind of claims that she makes. We think that more diversity in your gut microbiome is probably better than less. We think that prebiotic fiber is probably like a really good fuel for the gut. Eating enough fiber is probably good. Exercise has a positive effect on the gut, probably from lactate. We think too much saturated fat might be bad for the gut because of the bile salt end products from saturated fat. And we think maybe some fermented foods might be a little bit good. And that's pretty much it. Like there's not like, hey, here's my 18-step supplement regimen. to fix your gut microbiome, and it's an area that's we know, like in 20 years, we're going to know so much. Mm-hmm. But right now, we just don't know that much. And unfortunately, I think people have this view from like Hollywood movies and TV that it's like, problem, science solves it and knows the exact answer in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and it's like, It's more like 3 decades is usually when we get an exact answer. I think that was one of the problems with the pandemic is people were so critical of some of the things that happened, and I being one of them. But at the end of the day, I think people lost a lot of trust in the scientific process. And really, if they understood the scientific process, they would have known why they saw so many dissenting opinions. It's because we were literally trying to build a ship while we were trying to sail it.
Yeah,
right.
When you have a normal problem, you have decades of research, and then you can look back and go, okay, here was the best thing to do, right?
Right.
But now we have decades of research, and we have a cure for HIV, right? By the way, did anything get fucking cured more quietly than HIV, which is supposed to kill everybody? And now it's like you got HIV, it's like herpes. You know what? Like I'm being a bit hyperbole, but you know what I mean? Yeah. But that's because it happened over a very slow period of time. Whereas this, it's like we tried to mash together 3 decades of research in 6 months. It's going to be a shit show.
Yeah, has to be. Thanks for bringing up inflammation as well, because that's one I loved you rolling into.
What's that?
The inflammation, we've hit that a few times. So the fact that you did that without being brought up, I had to laugh. I'm like, I'm so happy right now.
If somebody uses the following terms, gut health, reset, any kind of reset, inflammation, adrenals, cortisol. Like, I'm not saying they're always full of shit, but these are usually buzzwords that don't continue to sell shit,
Fact.
Oh, I feel so vindicated, Lane. Like, I was a little bit afraid. I thought, he's going to bury me on something. We're going to get along real good, and then I'm going to say something dumb.
I'll make sure to send you the invoice.
Yeah, we might have forgot to discuss that part.
This one's on the house, boys. This one's on the house.
Yeah. And no, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate when we get, anyone's time. We've had a lot of guests on from some of our fellow meatheadiest of meatheads to, guys like you. And it's great to see, I sort of see you as like the bodybuilding community sent a satellite out into the world to kind of like, and it got sent out, it got launched in like 2009 at the Arnold Expo as like some eager kid wanting to, go out there and meet his heroes and also, get into the scene and we've, the probe has done its thing. It's gone off and
now we've discovered there's other life outside bodybuilding.
Yeah. No, it's like, I don't know. I get a satisfaction out of seeing someone who's actually a bodybuilder who can go toe to toe with these outside people and educate them and step them up, and that's been something I've really enjoyed, just watching bodybuilding itself sort of permeate into pop culture so much more. Like, look at all the most popular people online. They all work out. Like Chris Willix and Huberman and like, just name the top 20 podcasters. They all work out at the gym. And so there's this like radical sort of real, conquering of the outside culture with the weight room. And I just sort of I see you as a big part of that. And it's been fun to watch, man.
For sure.
I appreciate that, man. Honestly, I think, really what you can look at is like, dude, look how many women are in the gym now. How great is that?
Yeah.
Like when I got into lifting weights, if there was a girl at the gym, if she was like a 4, she became like an 8. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't any women in the gym. Yeah. Now it's like the women are like 60% of the gym. It's great. I think that's, awesome that weightlifting has become such a normal thing now. It's great.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What's the plan, Lane? What's next on your agenda? What's your next big event?
Shit. What is my next big event? Not a whole lot on until the end of the year, just with the holidays and everything. But I'm going back to Australia in April for a real big event over there. It's going to be myself, James Smith, Mark Carroll, Lauren Simpson, Hattie Boydell, a lot of heavy hitters, especially with the Australian market. We're doing a summit, so that's going to be fun. And then I'm probably going to start my own podcast next year, so that'll be fun. And I think I'll be able to do kind of a different sort of spin on it than most people have. And then thinking about writing a book, but actually doing it the proper way and going with a publisher and try to hit the New York Times bestseller list and all that kind of stuff.
Hell yeah.
Awesome.
That's a check mark in my career I haven't had yet. So I think it'd be fun to do.
Well, if you do a book, my one request is that you also read the entire audiobook, because I definitely need that effect.
Everybody said you could, like my CFO, Chris Boyd, he's an awesome guy. And I feel like of the people that know my brand, he knows my personal brand as good as anyone. So whenever I get a new opportunity, I always bring it to him. And when I was talking about a book, and I said an audio book, he's like, before we get into it, you have to voice it over. You cannot have anybody else do it. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. I always hate it when that happens. I get the audio book and it's just first chapter or something like that, they hand it off. Yeah. Okay, thanks, man. Appreciate you. Of course, BioLayne, your Instagram. They find you BioLayne. Is it BioLayne on every platform pretty much?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. BioLayne with a real blue check.
Not the one of the
OG. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, man. Welcome. Welcome for your time and everything, and best of luck. And remember, everybody, it's just bodybuilding.